Hello everyone, this is Pratima and welcome back to Planet Physiology. In previous two videos, we have studied how to prove long refractory period of cardiac muscle by extrasystole compensatory pause and by two successive stimuli. Today we shall discuss how to prove the same property by incomplete tetanus. For this, you should know what is tetanus. Tetanus is sustained state of muscle contraction caused by multiple successive stimuli, meaning the muscle remains in contracted state without any relaxation until the stimulation ends. Before we delve into the topic, please read the disclaimer. Now let's begin with the session. As usual, we dissect the frog and expose the heart. Ventricle is attached to the starling's heart lever and heart is stopped by applying mid-atrial ligature. It is the modified first ligature which is tied around the atria instead of at the junction of sinus venosus and atria. Due to application of ligature, ventricle stops contracting and now the electrode is lightly touched to the ventricle. If you have missed the video on Stannius ligature, link is provided in the description box below. For this experiment, we need to apply more than 30 stimuli per second, so we include Knipp's hammer in primary circuit. Secondary circuit is as usual. Knipp's hammer is connected in series with the primary coil. Only the connecting screws vary based on the requirement of the experiment. To provide single shock, wires are connected to the top screws of the induction coil, whereas to provide multiple stimuli, Knipp's hammer is taken into the circuit by attaching the wires to the bottom screws. When Knipp's hammer is taken into the circuit, primary coil automatically becomes the part of the circuit. Knipp's hammer works on the principle of electromagnetism. When the primary key is pressed, circuit is automatically made and broken by the Knipp's hammer, causing the ventricle to receive multiple successive stimuli as long as the primary key is pressed. I will post a separate video to explain details about the working principle of Knipp's hammer. Okay, once this setup is ready, we start the experiment. Since ventricle is standstill, kymograph just records a straight line or a small wavy line as seen in this tracing. Now as we press the primary key, Knipp's hammer begins to vibrate and delivers continuous stimuli to the ventricle. And we get the record like this. So I am playing the same record again so that you can observe. So here key is pressed and now it is released. So let's understand this graph. In all the experiments which involve stimulation of the tissue, time marker is always included in the primary circuit. So here is the top tracing of time marker and bottom tracing is the activity of cardiac muscle. At this point, ventricular stimulation started by pressing the tap key. And here the key is released and ventricular stimulation is stopped. So during this entire period, the ventricle was continuously stimulated due to making and breaking of electrical circuit by Knipp's hammer. The same is indicated by this rapid upstrokes and downstrokes of the time marker. Now if you observe the low tracing, you will note that as soon as stimulation started, ventricle began to contract. This downstroke is ventricular contraction or systole. But you can also note that after systole, ventricular diastole starts but doesn't complete. From this point onward, there are small systoles and diastoles until the stimulation continues. Ventricular relaxation completes only when the stimulation stops, that is when we release the key. We know that tetanus is sustained state of muscle contraction, but here the recording shows that during the entire period of stimulation, ventricle is partly contracted and continuously shows minute contractions and relaxations. Hence, this experiment is called as incomplete tetanus. Okay, now let's study how incomplete tetanus proves the property long refractory period. For the sake of understanding, let's stretch out this graph. So as soon as the key was pressed, the circuit was completed and the ventricle was stimulated. It began to contract. Since we have Nip's hammer in circuit, with every upstroke and downstroke of the hammer, ventricle was receiving the stimulus. So let's assume that this blue line is the first stimulation which has initiated ventricular systole. Now this next yellow line is the second stimulus which is arriving immediately after the first one. It has fallen during systole, and we have already studied with the previous experiments that systole is refractory. Hence the ventricle has not responded to this second stimulus. In the same way, all these successive stimuli shown by yellow color have fallen while the first systole was in progress and hence were ineffective. Now the ventricular diastole has started. The next stimulus that has arrived at this point has initiated another contraction because this phase is not refractory. Since ventricle has just started to relax from its first contraction and this stimulus has again set it to contract, the force of contraction is very less. While the second contraction is in progress, another stimulus has arrived from the electrode, but again because it is falling in systole, it is not effective. So as ventricle begins to relax from this second contraction, it comes out of its refractory period and the next stimulus again sets it to contract, and this cycles repeat as long as the tap key is pressed. In this representation, all the stimuli indicated by yellow lines are falling in the refractory phase and hence are not effective. Blue lines indicate the stimuli falling in the non-refractory phases and initiating the contractions. Once the tap key is released, as shown by this white thick line, circuit is broken and Nip's hammer stops working. Now the ventricle shows complete relaxation. Thus, this wavy line between the beginning of the contraction and the completion of the relaxation indicates repeated cycles of systoles and diastoles due to multiple successive stimuli. Despite continuous stimulation, ventricle shows small degree of relaxation, indicating that the entire systole and very early part of diastole is refractory. As the cardiac muscles relax for a moment between the successive contractions, they cannot be fatigued and tetanized. These small intermittent diastoles also help ventricle to receive blood, which can be pumped out during the contractions. Even though this feeling is very less, it is sufficient to maintain blood flow to the vital organs like heart and brain. Thus, in this series of 3 experiments, that is extrasystole compensatory pause, effect of 2 successive stimuli and incomplete tetanus, we have studied that cardiac muscles possess the property of refractory period. Duration of refractory period is 0.3 seconds in ventricular muscles of humans, which includes the entire systole and very early part of the diastole. When compared to skeletal muscle, this duration is much longer and hence it is called as long refractory period. So we always say long refractory period with respect to cardiac muscle. If you are curious to know, find out which phase is refractory in skeletal muscle and how much is its duration. Post your answers in the comment section below. Coming to the last point, due to long refractory period, cardiac muscles cannot be fatigued and tetanized and continue to maintain circulation to vital organs like brain and heart. Okay, here another thought question. What are the differences between these 3 experiments to prove the long refractory period? Post your answers in the comment section. To understand molecular basis of refractory period, please refer my earlier video on properties of cardiac muscle part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Are you new to my channel? Then please subscribe it and press the bell icon to stay updated about the new releases. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thank you for joining in and see you in the next video.